The Delivery Man Who Bought the Company. Chapter 1. A Man They Never Saw. No one ever noticed Marcus Grant. At least, not the people he delivered to. He was the guy with the scanner clipped to his belt, the scuffed boots, the uniform with the fading logo. To them, he was a fixture of the building, like the elevator or the janitor cart. He came, dropped off packages, and disappeared. No one remembered his name, much less imagined he had one. But Marcus noticed everything. He noticed how executives smiled a little too wide when speaking to their own kind, but didn't make eye contact with him. He noticed the confidence in their walk, the expensive suits, the laughter that echoed through glass corridors like it belonged to royalty. He noticed how none of them ever asked how his day was, or if he had one. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have guessed, was that Marcus Grant had a mind sharper than most of the executives in those high-rises. He didn't just lift boxes. He read financial reports in his free time. He didn't just sort packages. He studied trends, watched market shifts, tracked corporate behaviors like a hawk. And he had a plan he'd been building quietly for 6 years, ever since life derailed the dream he once had. Chapter 2. From South Side to Strategy. Marcus was born on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood where dreams came cheap and rent came expensive. His mother, Cynthia Grant, worked double shifts at a steel fabrication plant after his father passed away when Marcus was just 8. She raised Marcus and his little sister Tasha alone, teaching them to never let the world define who they were. Marcus had always been gifted. In high school, his math teachers were baffled by how quickly he solved problems. He got a scholarship to attend Northwestern University, a world away from the streets he came from. Finance was his calling. He saw it as a way out, a way up. He imagined working at a hedge fund, managing portfolios worth billions, shaking hands with CEOs, making sure his mom never had to work another day in her life. But fate intervened. During his sophomore year, a machinery malfunction at the plant crushed his mother's hand. The injury ended her working life and began a series of hospital visits and mounting medical bills. With no income and no safety net, Marcus made the hardest decision of his life. He dropped out to support the family. He told himself it was temporary. It wasn't. Years passed, and Marcus took job after job. Manual labor, night shifts, car repairs, until he landed the delivery job. It was stable, predictable. It paid the bills. But it wasn't his future. Chapter 3. Laughter that changed everything. By 32, Marcus was a regular sight at Carter Voss Sloan, one of Chicago's most prominent branding firms. He'd been delivering to their office for 4 years. The place oozed prestige, sleek lobbies, modern art on the walls, and people who never acknowledged him unless a package required a signature. One afternoon, as Marcus dropped off a shipment, he heard laughter from behind the reception desk. Can you imagine if the delivery guy was running this place? The voice belonged to Tyler Brooks, the firm's senior creative director. Tailored suits, perfect smile, smug confidence. Another voice, one he knew too well, Lana Mitchell, head of marketing, chimed in. Please, he probably thinks a boardroom is where you store boxes. He didn't know he heard them, but he did. That moment changed everything. Chapter 4. The Fire Inside. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat in his van outside his apartment, phone in hand, staring into the darkness. He finally called someone he hadn't spoken to in weeks, Andre Washington, his closest friend since high school. You good? Andre asked immediately. Not really, Marcus replied, eyes still on the dashboard. You at least thinking straight? Marcus sighed. I've been thinking small for too long. Andre didn't say much. He didn't need to. You ever feel like you've been invisible so long people forgot you were even there? Marcus asked. Andre post. No, bro. They never saw you in the first place. And that means when you finally show up, they won't be ready. Chapter 5. The Blueprint. The next morning, Marcus dusted off an old leather-bound notebook, one filled with scribbles, market analysis, startup ideas, and plans he had buried under the weight of responsibility. But this time he saw something different. Gato va Sholuan. He had delivered to them for years. He knew their routines, their patterns. He had overheard meetings, watched clients storm out, tracked who stayed and who got fired. And he had seen the cracks, shrinking accounts, high turnover, leadership clinging to outdated strategies. They were vulnerable. He didn't just want revenge. He wanted the company. Chapter 6. The Pitch. 2 days later, Marcus sat across from Raymond Ellis, a former investment banker turned venture capitalist. Raymond was skeptical until Marcus opened the folder. It was filled with charts, financial breakdowns, projections, and a brutally accurate analysis of Carter Vosloone's weaknesses. Marcus didn't just understand the firm. He understood the industry. And he had a plan to turn the company around. Raymond leaned back, impressed. I don't usually bet on people. I bet on inevitability. And what you're describing sounds inevitable. He slid a check across the table. Don't make me regret it. Part 2. From Invisible to Irreplaceable. Chapter 7. The First Move. Marcus didn't waste a second. With funding secured, he got to work. Step 1. Gather shares. He started small, reaching out to the silent partners of Carter Vosloone, the ones who had invested for returns, not prestige. They didn't care about the name on the letterhead. They cared about numbers. And Marcus had numbers. He laid out projections, offered clean buyouts with fair terms, and slowly, piece by piece, acquired ownership. Most never questioned his background. His presentations were polished, his strategy solid, his confidence unwavering. He didn't look like a delivery driver anymore. He looked like a man with a vision. And he was. But the biggest obstacle was still ahead. Clark Remington, CEO and co-founder, the man who once said in an elevator that some people were born to deliver packages, not ideas. Marcus hadn't forgotten. Chapter 8. The Crack in the Throne. Clark Remington had ruled Carter Vosloone for over 2 decades. His reputation was built on charm, not competence. The firm's early success had come from bold branding campaigns during the tech boom. But in recent years, Clark had relied more on image than innovation. And now that image was cracking. Marcus knew from his contacts inside the firm, young assistants, analysts, even a former HR manager, that Carter Vosloone had just lost the Marinex account, a $20 million client. Clark hadn't told the board yet, and that was Marcus's opening. Using a shell company, Marcus requested a meeting with Clark, posing as a potential investor. Clark, desperate for capital and unaware of who he was truly meeting, agreed. They met in Clark's penthouse office. Leather furniture, overpriced scotch, a panoramic view of the city. Clark barely glanced up. So, what are you looking to invest in? Marcus smiled politely. I want the company. Clark laughed, confused. You mean a stake? Marcus shook his head. I mean everything. Controlling interest. Leadership. A fresh start. The smile faded from Clark's face. And then Marcus slid the report across the table. You're bleeding money, Clark. You've lost Marinex. Morale is an all-time low. And your creative team is 18 months behind industry trends. You're about 6 months from collapse. Clark went pale. Where did you get this? He asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. You think you can just walk in here and take over my company? Marcus leaned forward. No, Clark. I've already started. You just didn't notice, just like you never noticed me. Chapter 9. The End of an Era. It took 48 hours. After heated calls, panicked reviews, and a hastily arranged emergency board meeting, Clark Remington agreed to step down. The payout Marcus offered was generous, more than fair. But Clark didn't leave the office with dignity. He left with silence and a single box of personal belongings. That same morning, an email went out to every employee. Mandatory company-wide meeting. 3 p.m. Main conference room. Attendance required. No explanation. Just a time, a location, and the subtle tremor of something big. By 2:50 p.m., the room was packed. By 3 p.m., it was electric. By 3:01 p.m., silence fell. And then the door opened. Marcus walked in, not in uniform, not with a box in hand, but in a tailored suit, calm and collected. A few gasps rippled across the room. Some recognized him instantly. Others blinked, confused. Tyler Brooks leaned toward Lana Mitchell. No way, he whispered. That's the delivery guy. But it was too late for whispers. Marcus stepped to the front and placed a thick folder on the table. As of this morning, he said evenly, I am the new majority owner of Carter Voss Sloan. The room exploded in stunned murmurs. You're joking, Tyler said aloud. Marcus met his eyes. Do I look like I'm joking? The silence that followed was the sound of ego shattering. Chapter 10, The Reckoning. Marcus didn't hold back. He laid out the facts, the numbers, the failures. He addressed the leadership mistakes, the toxic culture, the arrogance that had choked innovation. He didn't name names, he didn't have to. Everyone knew who had failed. Some looked down at their shoes. Some glared. Then he said the words that would be quoted in the hallways for weeks. Some of you won't be here by the end of the day. I don't carry dead weight. Tyler turned red. Lana whispered something under her breath. Then Marcus looked straight at Tyler. Let's start with the Hartwell account. Care to explain how you lost it? Tyler stammered, then fell silent. I thought so. And just like that, the power in the room shifted. Marcus had become the gravity. Chapter 11, The Exit and the Echo. Tyler stormed out first. Then Lana. Others followed. Some resigned. Some were politely escorted out. The old guard was crumbling. But not everyone left. Many younger employees, the ones who had kept their heads down, done the real work, and received none of the credit, watched Marcus with admiration. They saw a man who had walked their path, who knew what it was like to be overlooked, and they stayed. Marcus didn't promise miracles. He promised accountability, innovation, respect. If you're here to build, you'll have a place, he told them. If you're here because you think you're owed something, you know where the door is. By the end of the week, Carter Voss Sloan had a new leadership team, a new direction, and a renewed sense of purpose. Chapter 12, The View from the Top. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in his office, at the top of the same building where he once waited for the elevator behind people who never saw him. The skyline stretched out before him. Cold Chicago light filtered through the glass. He wore no uniform now. No clipboard. No scanner. Just vision. Just legacy. He turned to see his sister Tasha standing in the doorway, wide-eyed. You really did it, she whispered. Marcus smiled. We did it.